You are welcome to our exhibition, The Legacies of Biafra, which is on display at Iwalewahaus in Bayreuth, Germany. The exhibition opened on the 8th of May and runs until the 4th of October 2025. This exhibition reflects on the Nigeria-Biafra War, which was from 1967 to 1970. This war was one of the earliest conflicts in post-independence Africa. This watershed moment left profound and enduring legacies on social and political structures in Nigeria, on international perceptions of the continent, and on the psyches of individuals and communities in eastern Nigeria directly affected by it. Through diverse media and perspectives, the artists involved in the exhibition examine these complex legacies, exploring themes of conflict, loss, displacement, humanitarian crisis, and the possibility of spiritual reckoning and healing. The exhibition is organized thematically, with each area drawing together pieces that engage with similar or contemporary, complementary aspects of the war and its aftermaths. Some works confront the realities of mass starvation and the targeting of Biafran civilians by the Nigerian army, while others explore how the war shaped contemporary Nigerian politics and socio-economic structures. The exhibition also acknowledges the remarkable entrepreneurial spirit and determination to build and to rebuild, actually, that emerged from the conflict, an important legacy of innovation, reconstruction and survival that continues to characterize affected communities today. The show depicts the deep sorrow and the loss resulting from the Nigeria-Biafra War. The exhibition reveals the complicated nature of peace in its wake, desire, yet elusive, and the persistent distrusts. The exhibition suggests that the multifaceted legacies of Biafra are as much a vision of the future as they are a culmination of the past, challenging us to consider how communities and wider nation navigate the long shadows of conflict. You're welcome to the exhibition. Thank you. So the exhibition is curated by Professor Louisa Uchum Egunike, and the project lead, who is the project lead, I was working very closely with her. I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working with her on the series, as well as Chike Azonye, who is the Vice President of the Nigerian Art Society UK. Other support which we received was from Katharina Greven, Sigrid Horsch Albert, who is the director of the Iwalewahaus Museum. And the exhibition would not have been possible without the dedication and collaboration of many hands and minds, including this Osterlong were on Das Engagement, which is my best German, Osama Abderrahman, Ego Ahayewi Sowinski, Paula Bateman, Emma Boksha, Inidelia Dedeji, J. Galado Garcia, again Katharina Greven, I don't know if I mentioned that before, Regis Hitmana, Nicole Marina Klug, Yvonne Mbanefo, Ekene Oboko, Ben Okri, Chinedu Oyali, and many others. Other institutions who have been involved include Child Migrant Stories, Iroko Theatre Company, and Nigerian Art Society UK, my organization. My Biafran Story Project, Red Cross Archives, CT, University of London, Gallery Oldham, and Brunei Gallery. The artists included in the exhibition include Titus Agbara, Hassan Aliu, my very good self, Chike Anyako, El Anatsui, Chuks Anyawu, Chike Azwonye, Chinwe Roy, Amifel Cliff Eribo, Uzo Egono, Imoisi Imonige, Middle Art, Tony Indikamu, Onyema Fodo Okeke, Olu Ugwebe, Edusa Obingo, Ade Ogundimu, Simon Okeke, Uche Okeke, Obi Okibo, Chinze Ojebo, Ondubisi Ona, Ben Onyema Obi, Raymond Soko, Obiora Odechukwu, Nchion Uwashe. It's supported by Durham University, the Africa Center in London, Nigeria Art Society, the University of Bayreuth, and Iwalewahaus. The Nigeria-Biafra War erupted 7 years after Nigeria gained independence from Britain in 1960. Colonial policies had fragmented the new nation along ethnic and regional lines, creating political tensions that eventually erupted into violence. In 1966, following political instability and military coups, pogroms in northern Nigeria primarily targeted the Igbo people, but also affected other ethnicities from eastern Nigeria, including the Ibibio, the Efik, and others. This violence forced many to flee to their ancestral homelands for safety. When peace talks failed between the Nigerian government and Eastern region, the people of Eastern region, no longer feeling safe within Nigeria, declared independence as the Republic of Biafra on the 30th of May, 1967. The war that followed lasted 2.5 years, causing immense civilian suffering. Nigeria imposed a total blockade on Biafra, leading to widespread starvation, as the region also faced aerial bombardment. Images of malnourished Biafran children shocked global conscience, sparking a significant international humanitarian response. On the 15th of January 1970, Biafra surrendered and was reintegrated into Nigeria. Beyond the political settlement, the war's legacy continues to resonate in everyday lives, community relationships, post-war politics, and economic structures. At the center of this exhibition lies a space of mourning and reflection. The monochromatic tones of works here, punctuated by the emotive choral music of Biafra Sings, invites a solemn encounter with the human cost of war. These pieces do not glorify battle, they dwell instead on absence, aftermath, and the quiet weight of memory. The Biafran soldier appears in fragments across this room as anonymous casualty, spectral figure, or echo of a once honored role. Obiora Odechukwu's rendering of an Igbo warrior recalls a time when martial strength conferred honor, deeply rooted in societal values. This vision offers a contrast to later depictions where soldiers are stripped of individuality and shown not as aggressors but as casualties of a devastating modern war. Ndubisi Ona's works carry this further. Unknown Soldiers presents a flattened field of uniformed skulls, evoking the mass death that the war brings. In our fallen heroes, two gaunt, hunting faces emerge, suggesting the toll borne by those who fought and the thin boundary between remembrance and erasure. Earth itself becomes a vessel of memory in Adeogundimu's installation. Artillery shells fall across crumpled fabric towards a grave-like marker embedded in the soil. The outline map of Nigeria, where Biafra demarcated within it, speaks to legacies of division, the weight of contested borders, and the burial of unresolved histories. Chinwechukwu Ogoroi's I Laughed Until I Cried brings reflection into color. Soldiers turned away from the viewer stand as shadowy silhouettes, at once threatening and faceless. Yet the community they face, including the artist herself, holds symbolic resistance. At its center, a mother clutches her child, stillness amid encroaching violence. Oluogube's Black Sunday, though not about Biafra directly, shares this mood of solemnity. Emerging from Nigeria's post-war political moment, its quiet abstraction resonates with grief and unease that threads through these works. Together, these pieces form a space not only of mourning, but of witness. So Chinwechukwu Ogoroi is famous for having painted the Queen of England for the 50th official Golden Jubilee portrait. She has been a posthumous member of Nigeria Art Society UK. She passed away around 2011, and her family still live in London, and we, the Nigeria Art Society UK, continue to honor and remember her art practice and include her in all the exhibitions that we do. Her coming to the UK was as a result of the war in Biafra. So she's one of the earliest people who left Nigeria to resettle in the UK in the early 1970s. where most of hard practice subsequently occurred. Zolu Guibe's painting and Obiero de Chukwus. This is the Ade Ogundemu installation we're talking about. Ade himself, married to an Igbo lady, was doing his national youth service in Enugu, and during his camp at Ogu was where he came across this cave-like structure on one of their sort of outings with the rest of the youth corps members, and he came across this excavation where loads of unexploded shells were seen in the soil. Ondubisi wonderful pieces. So as we progress through the exhibition, I would like to show you a section in which we have included media coverage of the war in Biafra. And some of these are newspapers from the very first day that the hostility began. And we are making it possible for people to actually go through the papers and read them to see what the news was at the time of the war's breakout. So these are newspapers from May, June, and September 1967. And then subsequently, from 1968 towards the end of the war. And also covering the international response and reaction, the diplomacy, where Nyerere backed the rebels, as is reported by the New Nigerian newspaper at the time. So as we progress through, on this board, people have responded, given their comments on the exhibition. The exhibition was seen by 10,000 people at Brunei Gallery. We hope to have a similar number seeing the exhibition while it is here at Iwalewahaus. As we progress through the exhibition.
Anyway, one day I think women.
So this film, Tabling a Conversation, is the artist's responses which were collated ahead of the exhibition. And in this piece, Imoisi Imonige talks about the work that he's making for the exhibition. Thank you. So as we walk through the exhibition to other sections showing more engagement by artists of the Nigeria Art Society UK, we come to this section of the exhibition. And in this section, feet and the act of walking and standing recur across many of the works in this area as potent visual metaphors for movement, physical, social, and psychological. Installed along this transitional corridor, the pieces evoke the disorientation of forced migration, the stillness of reflection, and the tentative progression towards peace and repair. Titus Agbara's bold feet overlays footprints in red and brown in that piece there. And they're crisscrossing patterns of evoking urgency and dispersal. They speak of the chaos of evacuation, the loss of land, and the uncertainty faced by those displaced. In contrast, Changing Times by Imoisi Imonige draws us into a scene of quiet companionship. 4 sets of feet gathered around a fire, inviting reflection on togetherness and resilience in the aftermath. Agbara's Back to the Sea returns us to the threshold, feet poised where tide meets land, offering a meditation on the transition. Its muted tones and elemental settings suggest a liminal space, a pause before change, a gesture towards peace. This idea of threshold is echoed in Ondubisi Ona's Homecoming, where a curved line of feet meets a broader road. The destination is unclear, but the work speaks to the shared experiences of departure, return, and the tenuous hope of reunion. In Ben Oyemaobi's Marching Towards a Greater Nigeria, the act of marching is emblematic of progress, unity, and national aspiration. Yet placed alongside the quieter, more ambiguous renderings in this section, the work invites reflection on how the post-war promise of togetherness sits against the lived realities of rupture and recovery. Across these images, walking becomes a visual language for survival, for transition, and for hope, an act at once ordinary and monumental. So the plight of families and children particularly is the theme of this room here, where we're showing a film made by Maurice Nwokeji, who was stuck in the enclave of Biafra as a child. His struggles without the presence of his parents during this time is a reality that was captured in Red Cross images such as this. His film, titled Ogumpiti, is a documentary in which Maurice tells the story of his lived experience through raids and famine as a young child during the Biafra conflict. The title refers to the word children created to describe the food, the single daily meal that they receive from the Red Cross, and the language born from necessity and survival. The film shows Maurice's journey from war-torn Biafra to eventual reunion with his parents in London, where he began a new life in Hackney. It is co-produced by Maurice Nwokeji, Mitchell Harris, and Esther Nightingale. The film weaves personal testimony with music composed and performed by Maurice and his band, Wanja. His voice and compositions create an emotional landscape that captures the enduring impact of childhood trauma, while also celebrating resilience and the possibility of renewal through art and memory. Complementing the film is a poignant photograph from the Red Cross showing a small child gazing outwards as they receive food ration from the Red Cross. An image that balances the vulnerability with quiet dignity. Nearby, the humanitarian appeal poster, Refugee Week Biafra, Help Feed the Refugees, responses to the powerful visual representation of suffering, and spoke directly to viewers' empathy and conscience, which is the piece behind you. You can look behind you and you'll see this piece. Thank you very much. So, help feed the children and the refugees of Biafra. This was the reality of many, including some of the artists involved in the Nigerian Art Society UK, who were actually active participants during the war. So as we follow into this room talks about the role of oil in the whole, sort of hostility and the breakdown of peace and the sort of descent into war. This room we call crude lines. Oil has long occupied an ambivalent place in Nigeria's national history. Its discovery transformed the country into one of Africa's largest economies and one of the world's major crude oil exporters. Yet oil has also contributed to the deep environmental damage in the Niger Delta and to the social and political unrest. During the Biafra War, oil politics were one of several factors that shaped the conflict. Biafra's borders encompassed many of Nigeria's key oil-producing regions, and the secession threatened federal control over this vital resource. In the decades since, struggles over oil have continued to define Nigeria's internal politics and conflicts, and visions of national progress. This room brings together works that reflect on oil's complex legacies, particularly as they affect communities in the Niger Delta. The pieces here speak to environmental devastation, exploitation, and connections between political power and spiritual manipulation. Hassan Ali, which is me, my painting flair, offers one of the room's most arresting images. Engulfed in flames, the collage contains symbols of Islam and Christianity, drawing a conceptual link between the volatility of crude oil and the zealotry of religious manipulation. In contemporary Nigeria, where organized religion can function both as spiritual force and a source of wealth, my work connects the misappropriation of oil money to the power dynamics within religious communities. Titus Agbara's Ogoni Memories and Imoisi Imonigi's Enigma of a Nation reflect on the environmental and human cost of oil extraction. Agbara's nooses, held aloft by a single hand, recall the execution of Ogoni 9, including Ken Saro-Wiwa, who campaigned against Shell's activities in the Delta. Imonige's bleeding tree and disembodied eye and mouth speak to a land choked with and wounded by exploitation. In Umbilical Code of Bad Governance, Raymond Soko critiques the nation's post-war failures through visceral imagery, a tire devoured by rats and cockroaches, symbolizing Nigeria's stalled progress and systemic delay. Chinze Ojebo's International Red Cross International Chessboard turns its gaze outwards, with figures referencing Britain, France, and Russia. The work points to the role of international interests in the Biafran War, framing Nigeria as a battleground for competing global powers. Ojebo's work underscores the complex web of domestic and international interests that shape the course of the conflict. So the barrenness of the trees in this painting is palpable. The death in the water, the spill of oil, the trees symbolizing the three main ethnic nations that form Nigeria, forcibly tied together, but bleeding at the point where they have been, sort of connected. While at the eye above watches in horror as trees are denuded of their leaves. The landscape is barren, the sky is dense with soot and with carbon, indicating the pollution. So many of the works in this exhibition draw upon uli motifs, an art form traditionally practiced by Igbo women, used to adorn the body and decorate the walls of homes. Revitalized in the post-war period by the Nsukka group, uli became a foundation for a new aesthetic led by artists such as Uche Okeke, who established the Fine Art Department at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. In the early 1970s, according to Simon Otebong, contemporary Nsukka school stressed uli's linearity, its play of negative and positive space, skillful deployment of space, quality of abstraction, two-dimensionality, and spontaneity of production with individual artistic variations. It was and is an art emphasizing drawing skills. Though rooted in Igbo cultural traditions, uli has offered a generative language for artists from across Nigeria and beyond. Chinwe Washe's Promises of Tomorrow takes up the soft lines and rhythmic balance of uli, using warm colors to evoke a sense of gentle optimism. The rising sun subtly recalls the emblem of Biafra, offering a quiet gesture towards loss and renewal. While Nsukka movement was shaped primarily by male artists, Uwashe's work draws attention back to uli's original female custodians, reasserting a quiet continuity with the art form's origins. In this room also is a piece by Olu Egwebe, We Must Pray Harder. And again, the exploration of uli and printmaking techniques, etching in that case, as well as a piece by Obiora Odechukwu, which is titled Nsukka Landscape. As we progress through the exhibition, we get into this room which we call Seams of Survival. In this room, Onyema Ofodi Okeke's Onye Duodo, the cloth mender, offers a poignant reflection on life after loss, drawing on the call once used to summon itinerant tailors, figures who emerged during the war, became symbols of adaptation in its wake. The work gestures to the resilience embedded in everyday survival. Stripped of possessions, Biafrans were forced to start again with almost nothing. The phrase Onye Duodo thus becomes a call to repair and a metaphor for mending lives torn apart by conflict. Decades later, this motif finds resonance across Nigeria, where internal displacement and economic hardship continues to reshape how people's lives live, work, and survive. And Anatsui's chief with history behind him introduces a commanding figure surrounded by cryptic symbols. While the title suggests a temporal break, that history lies behind him, it also reminds us that history is never truly past. It accumulates behind us and beneath us, forming the ground we walk on. Though not directly referencing Biafra, the work speaks to a broader condition of post-colonial reckoning, echoed in Anatsui's connection to the Nsukka school and its shared post-war context. Behind this piece is Obiora Dechukwu's In the Beginning, which renders a divided landscape above three colossal heads representing political leadership, hover in an elevated realm detached from the mass of ordinary people below. The lower plane is populated by the vulnerable, gaunt children with the distended bellies of kwashiorkor, frail bodies marked by want. The title paired with this imagery invites reflection on the war as a kind of founding catastrophe. Biafra as the original sin of post-independence Nigeria, a rupture not fully healed. It lingers in the nation's morale and political consciousness, shaping the inequalities that continue to define its present. Together, these works speak not only of the war destroyed, but of what came after, the slow, unglamorous labor of repair, the ongoing struggle to hold memory and rebuild, and the uneasy persistence of past wounds beneath the surface of national life. And here again in the corridor, we have another Chike Azonye abstract titled Osondu, again with the same vibrancy that we've come to expect of Chike's work, again also inspired by his lived experience of the war in Biafra. As we progress through the exhibition, we walk through this corridor into the next gallery room where we see another Chike work that's based on the theme of peace. This room is titled Survive the Peace, and central to this room is Chike Azonye's painting Aspiration, an etching by Chike Aniako, in fact 2 etchings by Chike Aniako, and a lithograph by Uzo Egonu titled War and Peace. In this room, which is based on the theme of peace, it explores the challenging aftermath of the Nigeria-Biafra War, examining what it means to survive the peace. A concept powerfully articulated in Cyprian Ekwensi's novel of the same name. Ekwensi's works reveal how the formal cessation of hostilities often marks not only an end but a beginning of new struggles as communities attempt to rebuild amid lingering tensions and trauma. Azonye's Aspiration directly confronts the possibility of reconciliation in post-war Nigeria. 3 figures representing Nigeria's largest ethno-nations, Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo, stand before a dove, the universal symbol of peace. The composition suggests both hope and uncertainty, asking whether or not peaceful coexistence can emerge. This ambivalence towards peace resonates in Uzo Egonu's War and Peace, created from exile in London. Throughout the conflict, Egonu produced works responding to its brutality, despite being physically removed from the events. Here, birds of prey and birds of peace intertwine in uneasy tension, expressing anxiety about Biafra's reintegration into Nigeria and fears of retribution that haunted many at the war's end. Chike Aniako's works and spiritual dimensions to this exploration of post-conflict society. In one piece, a Christ-like figure with outstretched arms rises above a crowd of swirling forms reminiscent of flames, suggesting both sacrifice and possible redemption. His companion work depicts another divine-like presence surrounded by shadowy figures moving upwards in procession, carrying burdens. Together, these images evoke both the weight of survival and the human impulse towards transcendence, even amidst devastation. Through these works, we witness how the complex process of reconciliation and rebuilding reveals new fractures and demands new forms of courage from those who have already endured unspeakable loss. As we move through the exhibition, we get into the final room in the show, the weight of remembering. Chike Azonye's poignant work, Ozo Emena, anchors this final space with its title, A Form of Prayer or Meditation, pleading, may it not happen again. The artwork confronts the deep wounds of the Nigeria-Biafra War while highlighting a contemporary reluctance to fully reckon with this painful chapter of history. Drawing on biblical imagery, Azoenie creates a visual mediation on memory and possibility. The piece calls for greater recognition of those lost during the conflict, while simultaneously imagining pathways towards healing. At its center stands a powerful symbol of potential unity. Three figures standing at the center, shoulder to shoulder, representing in CBD, symbols for unity and separation appear in both the painful past and the imagined future, underscoring the ongoing struggle to forge meaningful national cohesion. The Uli symbols of kola nut, appear in this painting as well. A symbol central to Igbo ceremonial life, grounds the work firmly within an Igbo experience of post-independence nationhood. This theme of representation echoes throughout the exhibition, notably in Obiora Odechukwu's works. The recurring motif of Nigeria's three major ethnic groups reflects the fundamental challenge of post-colonial Nigerian politics, mediating diverse interests across a complex nation. In one composition, a chameleon hovers above these representative figures, suggesting both the fluidity of identity and the possibility of transformation, while simultaneously hinting at distrust and concealment. This duality speaks to the complexity of reconciliation in a wounded society. Odechukwu's General is Up reminds us of another persistent reality, the military's enduring influence in post-war Nigerian politics. Ozoemena's prayer resonates beyond these walls, a contemplation of remembrance and recognition. The Legacies of Biafra exhibition is comprised of a number of films. And the films, one of the films was made as the artists were preparing for the exhibition and recounting the ideas with which they were going to engage in the works that they made for the show. The other film, Ugumpiti, which you saw earlier on, is a lived experience story by Maurice Onwokeji. A young lady by the name of Amifel Cliff Eribo did a film called My History. She made the film My History as a university final year project in filmmaking. And the film is also exhibited, included in the exhibition, as well as is Obi Okigbo's film, some of which we will see shortly. So the plight of the war to families and mothers and children is the theme of this section of the exhibition. And as you look through the works, there's works by Obiora Odechukwu, Simon Okeke, Uche Okeke, Chuks Anyanwu. This room is titled Between Her Arms. The corridor brings together depictions of mother and child that spans moments of calm, upheaval, and aftermath. Across these works, the pairing of mother and child becomes a potent visual motif, sometimes intimate and sacred, at other times symbolic of national crisis and personal loss. Several works predate the war and offer a striking contrast to the later depictions of trauma. In Simon Okeke's 1965 painting, rounded, healthy forms show mother and child in embrace. The warmth of the palette and the softness of posture together conjure a mood of peace and domestic vitality. Likewise, a collage by Obiora Odechukwu represents featureless figures adorned with golden halos, echoing Madonna and child iconography. The composition, meditative and stylized, invites contemplation and evokes quiet reverence. Uchekeke's minimalist lino prints depict mother and child as single, continuous form. The child nestles in the mother's arms and the two figures seem to merge, an ode to closeness and everyday nurture. These peaceful visions stand in sharp contrast to later depictions shaped by war. Obiora wartime poster, produced for Biafra's Ministry of Information, shows a emaciated mother carrying her child on her hip. Her angular face and exposed neck are set against a yellow background, invoking the rising sun of the Biafran flag. The caption, "Help the Biafran mother and child," casts a pair of public archetypes of war, suffering, and humanitarian need. In a post-war print, Udechukwu returns to the motif. This time, mother and child are rendered in black and white. The figures are starkly drawn, their faces solemn, the space around them charged with this haunting stillness. What once resembled the sun now appears more like a moon, casting a cold, mournful light. An atmosphere of grief replaces the earlier appeal for aid. In Chuks Anyawu's painting, a mother attempts to nurse her child, whose limbs are frail and hunger is palpable. Her ribs protrude, her breast no longer bear milk. A scene heavy with both the limits of care and persistence of it. Together, these works chart how war transforms the language of caregiving, turning private acts of nurture into enduring symbols of memory, absence, and survival. So these pieces are a necessary part of the exhibition, given that in the West, the media attention and the media focus on the war in Biafra was of a famine. So most people didn't realize it was a war. They thought of Biafra as being a famine in Africa. So as we progress through the exhibition, we come into this room where we are exhibiting various posters that were made by the Ministry of Information in Biafra. In this room also we have books that have been written on the subject of Biafra in this case. Some memorabilia, including a tie from Biafra, a tie pin, a Biafra calendar, various texts. This room highlights the role that artists played in the war. It brings together posters, printed ephemera, and archival literature that speak to the ways in which Biafra sought to represent, mobilize, and sustain itself during the war. The posters displayed here by Biafra Ministry of Information and Propaganda Directorate are designed as public service announcements, morale boosters, and appeal for aid. They reflect a vibrant visual culture shaped by crisis. Artists such as Uche Okeke, Obiora Odechukwu, Bons Nwabiani, Paul Igboanugu, some of whom feature elsewhere in this exhibition, played key roles in production of these works. Vivid declarations of unity and resilience are juxtaposed with calls to cultivate food, donate to refugee relief, and stay strong in the face of devastating loss. They offer complex and sometimes contradictory visions of life during the war. Images of soldiers' bravery sit beside haunting depictions of hunger. The posters also hint at daily rhythms within Biafra. Performances by the armed forces, theater, the launch of national lottery, and other cultural moments punctuate the bleakness, revealing a nation trying to live as well as survive. Alongside these posters is a selection of publications, stamps, and currency, everyday objects that capture how Biafra narrated itself to its citizens and to the world. At first overlooked by the global media, the war drew international attention by mid-1968 as photos of starving children flooded Western press. The iconic image of a child with kwashiorkor became not only a symbol of Biafra's suffering, but later a shorthand for famine across Africa. So these posters in this room are an important aspect of the art that was created at its time, of a functional nature, to communicate as art has a role to do in the world. And here, to sum up that narrative, is a painting by Edosa Ogigo, which is titled The Aftermath. And in The Aftermath, it's not only the Biafran children who are destitute, it's children across Nigeria who are destitute, with children who are without food or without education. We have the largest population of school-age children in the world. So continuing the theme of the plight of children, this piece would have been created, responding to the effect of malnutrition in children. Hunger as a weapon of war is what Tony Ndikawu calls this painting, on which he has overlaid, symbols from Uli and Nsibidi. As we progress into the exhibition, we come into a room which contains a film by Obi Okigbo and her installation, which contains a chart of an arboretum, a garden for peace, Arboretum Biafra, as well as manuscripts from her father's poetry, original manuscripts from her father's poetry, and a painting. So Obi's Ode to Remembrance, which is the title of this installation, is a deeply personal meditation on collective trauma, healing and regeneration. The work responds to the enduring impact of the Nigeria-Biafra War and draws on Okigbo's own artistic inheritance as daughter of the poet Christopher Okigbo, who died while serving in the Biafran army. This triptych installation weaves together painting, text, and film. The central canvas depicts Mau, the Igbo masquerade, an ancestral figure linked to protection, justice, and community. Now part of a larger ensemble, the image continues to anchor the installation in the symbolic and spiritual power of Mau, which also lies at the heart of Okigbo's imagined memorial design. Alongside the painting, Okigbo presents a hand-drawn map of eastern Nigeria, marked with ecological detail and pages from her father's poetry. These elements explore the relationship between memory and geography, tying personal and cultural history to the terrain of Igbo land. The installation also includes a film in which Okigbo recites her father's verses amid a densely wooded landscape. The setting evokes her vision for a living memorial garden, a healing space inspired by Igbo Umbari philosophy, structured as a maze. This imagined garden would feature reading pagodas, quiet spaces, and a raised shrine, Mau at its center. Conceived as a guardian of the site and advocate for the departed, the Mau presides over a space where remembrance becomes an act of renewal. Through painting, poetry, and film, Ode to Remembrance transforms mourning into ritual and reflection. Christopher Okigbo's words echo through the work, anchoring personal grief in collective memory. Condolences from our swollen lips, laden with condolences. The myth maker accompanies us. The rattles are here with us. Condolences from our split tongue of the slit drum. Condolences. Ode to Remembrance invites viewers into a space where loss is honored, memory is cultivated, and the seeds of healing are planted. As we progress through the exhibition, we come into this room, which is titled The Fault Lines of a Nation. This is the opening section of the Legacies of Biafra exhibition. It explores the fragility of nationhood. In this room, Antonio Ndikawu's ceramic installation, Repercussions, draws on symbols from multiple African cultures to evoke both suffering and resilience. The color palette, referencing both Biafran and Nigerian flags, creates a visual tension between competing national identities. At the heart of the work is Biafra, not only as a historical rupture, but as a lens through which the idea of Nigerian nationhood is critically examined. Fragile ceramic tiles, linked yet separate, reflect the fractured foundations of the post-colonial state and the ongoing questions Biafra continues to raise. Ade Ogundimu's Behind the Scene expands the focus to the international dimensions of the conflict. While Ndikawu highlights internal fracture, Ogundimu questions the role of foreign powers, particularly Britain, in shaping the course of the war. Together, these works demonstrate how unresolved tensions, both domestic and global, continue to shape how the conflict is remembered Chiwuchukwu Goroi's No More Bloody Wars 2 reimagines Biafra's iconic rising sun emblem as a burning flame, evoking both devastation and resistance. Her piece speaks to the themes explored in neighboring works, offering a lament on the war's traumatic legacy and a wider reflection on the enduring consequences when state failure, foreign interference, and contested histories collide. These works, created across different moments, engage in a visual dialogue that connects past and present. Together, they invite viewers to consider how national symbols are created, challenged, and transformed through conflict, and how their meanings continue to evolve. I take you on a journey through the rest of the collection in the beautiful galleries of Iwalewahaus. So in this section, the Path to Exile, that's what the title of this room is called. And in this room is a painting by Chike Azonye titled Exodus, and the theme of Exodus in a Red Cross photograph, as well as in an etching by Obiora Odechukwu. The room focuses on the mass displacement caused by the Nigeria-Biafra War. As the conflict escalated, millions were forced to flee on foot, by train, and through makeshift convoys, carrying whatever they could manage. These journeys, undertaken in desperation and uncertainty, became one of the defining experiences of the war. Chike Azonye's Exodus draws on biblical allusions of Igbo's cultural symbolism to reflect this mass movement. Figures rendered in silhouette carry their belongings on their heads, each load shaped to echo the four lobes of the kola nut, a sacred emblem of Igbo culture symbolizing unity, hospitality, and communion with the divine. The title invokes the Old Testament story of a people's search for freedom and sanctuary, while the anonymity of the travelers gesture towards the collective nature of displacement as Biafra's lost territory during the war. Obiora Odechukwu's The Exile Train depicts another kind of forced return, a mass exodus of Eastern Nigerians from other parts of the country following the 1966 pogroms. Using the visual language of Uli, a traditional Igbo design system, Odechukwu captures the vulnerability and dislocation of those uprooted by violence. Of this and other works from the period, he writes, "They stem from my first-hand experience or observations of genocide, suffering, hunger, kwashiorkor, and air raids." Alongside these stylized portrayals, a documentary photograph from the Red Cross Archives offers a stark contrast, capturing one of many Nigerian evacuations undertaken during the war. It speaks to the immense scale of humanitarian need. International aid efforts, particularly by the Red Cross, became a defining aspect of the Biafran crisis. The relief response exposed new fault lines in the ethics of aid and played a foundational role in reshaping the global humanitarian practice. Together, these works invite reflection on the physical and psychological toll of forced movement and on the enduring imagery of people in motion, burdened by both memory and necessity. We progress from this room into the room which we title No Shelter from Sorrow. In this room, I have the pleasure of introducing my very own painting, which I call Oh My Africa. Grief threads its way through the works in this room, not only as personal sorrow, but as shared haunting. These images confront the long reach of violence and the ways in which war embeds itself in bodies, landscapes, and cultural memory. Though distinct in voice and form, together they mediate on survival, remembrance, and the intergenerational echoes of suffering. My painting, Oh My Africa, expands on the frame of conflict, on a secular canvas that evokes historical recurrence. I draw a visual line from the transatlantic slave trade through colonial rule to the Nigeria-Biafra War. Echoing the arguments of scholars like Walter Rodney, I position Biafra as another chapter in a larger narrative of displacement and systemic violence, a continent's anguish caught in cycles of devastation. Augustine Okoye, known as Middle Art, served as both artist and soldier. His sign painter aesthetic carries over into War is Not Good and bombing Operation Warp Out, which present war not as an abstract, but as an instruction with bold scenes of aerial bombardment, engulfed vehicles and soldiers drowning or aflame. These works confront viewers with the horror of combat. The Biafran rising sun, embedded in his signature, marks with allegiance and warning. Uche Okeke's oil painting, which is here, this one here. So Uche Okeke's oil pastel painting responds to the 1966 pogroms that targeted Eastern Nigerians in the north, violence that preceded and propelled the war. In the foreground, a hollow-eyed family bears witness. Behind them, ghostly forms rise in shafts of diffused light. This spectral presence suggests not only mourning, but the permeability of worlds, the living and the dead held in uneasy proximity. In Obiora Odechukwu's etchings and print, a fragile triad appears, an elderly figure stooped with a walking stick, and a mother with her child in the background. The child's swollen belly marks the presence of kwashiorkor, one of the most visible signs of war-induced starvation. Here, the most vulnerable carry the weight of a collapsing world. A nearby work by Chuks Anyanwu, a wounded man looks skyward, blood trailing from his temple, whether in search of divine intervention or watching the bombers descend. The upward tilt of his head may recall a moment when even the sky offered no shelter. And as we come out of this room, we enjoy Migrants No Entry, a more contemporary response by Chinwechukwu Ogoroy, looking at the violence towards the migrants, towards the outsider, towards minorities. And this is both emblematic of the world today that we live in, where the hostility against the migrant is met with the sort of the offshoot of divide and rule policies, where we were taught to learn to hate each other, and which is one of the causes of the Nigeria-Biafra war. But also here in this corridor is a stunning painting by Dr. Ade Ogundemu, titled By a Thread, in which we see in a relief map of Nigeria, the shape of the Biafra region drifts away into the sea, held by threads that have been burnt, that have been seared, and the half yellow sun emblem motif also floating away from Nigeria, with the rusty scissors there about to cut this thread, which is the only available means of holding the country together, a very symbolic piece. With this brings me to the end of the tour, and the exhibition continues until the 4th of October, where I hope everybody will make the effort to come see it at Iwalewahaus in Bayreuth. The exhibition is on a global tour, originating at Brunei Gallery in 2018. It subsequently traveled to the Gallery Oldham in Greater Manchester. We hope to have it on show in the United States of America in due course, as well as later on in Africa and then in Nigeria. This is a peaceful and inclusive exhibition looking at the history of Nigeria from the perspective and the lens of artists who have made work to respond to these legacies of Biafra, which are a Nigerian story to tell, regardless of what part of Nigeria that we all come from. Thank you.